Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Opportunity China's pre-departure question and answer session. Now, for those of you who have in the past tuned in to Opportunity China's pre-departure webinars, you'll note that they had quite a structured system of working where we would go through different sections, different themes, and look at various different aspects of living and working in China. The purpose of today isn't quite to do that. The purpose of today is to simply open this up as a forum to all of our teachers, no matter what stage of the pre-departure process you are on at the moment. So at any point throughout our question and answer session today, if you have any questions whatsoever, it doesn't matter the order, it doesn't matter if we're going from speaking about something with one subject to a completely different subject, please do feel free to put those straight in the box, which is just next to the screen, and I will ensure that that question is answered. My name's Will Perrins. I am the Partnerships and Recruitment Manager for Opportunity China. Those of you who have listened to our pre-departure webinars in the past will recognise my voice. Those of you who attended our pre-departure session in London will also recognise that. I was a former teacher in China myself, so the answers that I will give are both from a practical and a professional point of view, knowing exactly what happens, but also from a personal perspective as well. So if you have any questions related to what you need to pack, related to what to expect when you go to China, related to health and safety, related to security, related to anything at all when it comes to China, please do make sure you put those in the box today. So it would be great to open the floor out to any questions that you might have to come in. I'll just pause for a moment or two, as usually there's a little bit of lag in our videos. So please do feel free to pop any questions that you might have in the box on the right. If no questions come in, then what I'll start doing is start going through some of our most commonly asked questions, including some of the biggest hits from last year from teachers of questions that we had coming in as emails, both before and after teachers had gone to China. But please do feel free, just for the moment, to put down any questions you like over the next few moments. Georgia, when will we be expected to book flights? That's a really good question, Georgia. It really does entirely depend on the date that you're going to be flying out to China on. What we would recommend you do, and what we very strongly recommend you do, is ensure that you do not book your flights until after you have your visa in your passport. When it comes to moving to China, there can be all sorts of small hiccups along the way when it comes to visa processing that can knock off timetabling quite a lot. What we would tend to recommend is ensuring that you have your flight booked immediately after you have your visa in your passport and an arrival date has been set and agreed on with your partner school. So ensuring that you have that continual contact and communication with your HR representative in China, as well as with your Opportunity China representative over here, to ensure that we know when you're going, you know when you're going, and once you have your visa in your passport, you can book your flight to confirm that. When it comes to flights, we do tend to recommend booking a flexible return ticket. So booking a flight out there, and if you're able to get a flexible return date, having that done as well, in order to ensure that once you have your flight reimbursements, absolutely everything can be covered by that. There are options to get flexible return flights through Opportunity China's partner STA Travel. You'll be able to find information on STA Travel on our website. I'll just quickly pop over to that just now. So if you visit Opportunity China's website just here, visit the section just at the top here called Teacher Resources, give it a click. And what will go on from here will be a very useful page full of lots of great links to bits of information on pre-departure, on once you are in China, and absolutely everything that you're going to need so far as that's concerned. So if you go to our pre-departure guide, just up here, you'll be able to find a really good list and a really good rundown, quite detailed, of each step, from step one of looking at your contract if you've just been offered it, all the way down to visa applications and also booking your flight. So you can find here the Opportunity China partner with STA Travel. We have a dedicated representative at STA Travel. You can see here they can be contacted at opportunity.china@statravel.com. So for those of you who want to go through that channel, certainly do go ahead. It's absolutely not a requirement for you to have to go through them to book your flights. If you want find something cheaper, if you find something more convenient for you, that's absolutely fine as well, but it's certainly an option that is there for you. Ethan, is it considered rude in Chinese culture to refuse food offered? I can't eat anything containing gluten, so I imagine I'll be doing a lot of refusing. Any tips? Really good question there, Ethan. Really good question. It is not it's not rude to refuse food that's offered, in so long as you give plenty of notice and advance notice. If, say, for instance, you're going out with a group of Chinese friends, or a group of Chinese colleagues, and you're with a big boss and they sort of put a lot of food in the middle of the table, it's important just that you ensure that somebody at the table will know that you have a gluten intolerance. They'll be very understanding of it. They'll actually, in all likelihood, go quite far out their way to make sure that you're okay and you're not eating that. It can sometimes swing a little bit too much the other way, where you can feel a little bit awkward about them fussing over you a bit too much. But it's absolutely no problem at all. They absolutely do understand concepts such as gluten intolerance or any allergies that there might be. But as with many things in China, don't take for granted some of the health and safety standards and warnings that you might get in the UK that would necessarily appear over there. In fact, in all likelihood, they're not going to. So always ask, or always have a Chinese friend who can ask. What's also a really good idea is when you arrive to ask the HR representatives at your school to write you in Chinese on a small piece of paper if you have what your allergy is, if you have an allergy or if you have an intolerance, so you can show that at a restaurant to any waiters or waitresses. And also in your first few Chinese lessons, when you start taking those up, to actually learn to say I am allergic to, or I have an intolerance to something as well. It was actually one of the first lessons that I almost insisted on doing once arriving in China. It is trickier than having an intolerance or having allergies in a country like the UK or the United States, but it is certainly workable. You've just got to be alert and aware of it. Georgia, will we have access to our English bank account whilst there? Just wondering how we pay for things. Our first paycheck comes in. Really good question there, Georgia. Yes, you will have access to your UK bank account. In fact, more and more ATM machines in China are accepting foreign cards than ever before. The majority actually will, especially if you are in a first, second, or third tier city, which all of you will be. Make sure you go to ATMs outside the large banks in China, so banks such as Bank of China, China Construction Bank, China Merchants Bank, HSBC, ATMs outside all of these major large financial institutions will accept cards from across the world. China is a little bit different to most of the rest of the world in that the vast majority of bank account cards in China are done through a Chinese-owned company called UnionPay. When you get your first Chinese bank card, you'll see that you have like a big UnionPay thing written on it, where you'd usually see Visa or Maestro or MasterCard or Amex. And because of that, it does mean that sometimes there will be additional charges. What I would always recommend doing and ensuring that you do is when you're using your British bank account or money from your British bank account, taking out cash from an ATM and keeping that cash with you, as opposed to using your card for a card machine, as the charges for those can be very high, whereas the charges for withdrawing are very, very small indeed. when it comes to going abroad and having a foreign bank account, really make sure you contact your bank to let them know to put a mark on your account that you have gone to China and you will be potentially using your card over there. The biggest problem that people tend to get when going over to China is not letting their bank know, so their bank doesn't put a mark against it. Then their account may very well get suspended. They might not be able to use their card whilst abroad, and they might get locked out of their bank account, which when you're in your home country and you can just pop down to your local branch if you need to show ID, or you can call them up, becomes a little bit more of a tricky situation in China where you can't necessarily do that. So again, the big points to take away from that are: make sure you let your bank know you're going to China before you go. Also, make sure that you use your UK or US or Canadian or Australian bank account to withdraw cash from ATMs and avoid having to use your card at card machines, as quite often in China, those charges will apply quite heavily to non-union pay cards. Any other questions just at the moment? Okay, well, if you do have any other questions, keep them coming in. But what I'm just going to do now is I'm just going to go and run through a few of the more common questions that people do come up with, and go through a few of the really important things that you're going to need to know and need to use, and show you a few little things as well that might be handy once you go to China. Let's just stay first of all on money, on finance. So again, on our teacher resources page, we do have a section on money in China. It's just down towards the bottom here, it says Money Matters. But one question, and this is largely to do with the cost of things, it's largely to do with how much money you're going to want to take, rough translations of things, so what it looks like to set up a bank account in China. What I would say, though, as a very common question that we tend to get is: how easy is it, or how simple is it to transfer money from China, from your Chinese bank account that you're going to be getting paid into, to a bank account in your home country? The answer, unfortunately, is it's not as simple as it would be doing it, say, from a European country or many other countries. A large part of this is due to China's financial system and market system being immensely different, and all kinds of complex reasons that go hand in hand with that I do not fully understand. But the upshot of it is that it makes it quite tricky to transfer money between those accounts. Now, the first stumbling block that you're likely going to come across is that as a foreigner moving to China, you're going to be set up with a very, very simple bank account. As you are a non-permanent resident, you will be a resident for a year, and that can be renewed onwards again, but you're not going to be there the whole time, which means you're likely only to be able to set up the most basic of cash checking accounts. With these accounts, the functionality of them is very limited, especially when it comes to things like online banking and when it comes to things like international transfers. To put it simply, you're not going to be able to transfer money internationally from your Chinese bank account. Therefore, you will either need to use applications that are available online to do it. You could use something like Western Union to transfer money, but all of these things I wouldn't heavily recommend, as there is a real problem with security on them. What I would recommend is going to your company, going to the HR team there and asking them to help you transfer money across, or once you've been there for a little while, as you're likely not begin to want to send money back to your home country from China, going with a Chinese friend to have them transfer the money you across from their bank account. This is actually quite simple as a process once you do it, but it is a little bit time intensive. It would involve you having to go to the bank with the HR representative from your school or with your Chinese friend, take cash out of your account, put it instantly in their account, and then have them transfer that cash back well, have them transfer that cash internationally to your account. There is a limit for the majority of personal Chinese bank accounts, how much they can transfer internationally. It is usually around between 20 and 50,000 yuan, which is between around 2,000, 5,000 pounds that can be transferred during a period of 2 weeks to a month. So make sure if you're coming towards the end of your time in China that you're transferring money back and that you're transferring money in installments. Also, remember when you're coming back, if you're taking cash with you, you can take a limit of 20,000 in or out of the country as well. That's 20,000 yuan. You can't take any more or any less. Some people do like to hedge their bets and try their luck with taking a little bit more or a little bit less out, but we certainly wouldn't recommend doing that. Now, another question that we tend to get is healthcare and actually the health check that's involved once you arrive in China. So when it comes to healthcare in China, a lot of people tend to be a little concerned, a little worried. Health is the most important thing, and it's very important to ensure that you look after your health whilst you are in China. It does certainly pay to research institutions and hospitals that are in your area. They are generally ranked from a 1 to wherever scale, depending on the quality of hospitals in the city where you're going to be based. So you can usually get a bit of a good idea as to where you're going to be going with that. Public healthcare in China is going to be the most common thing that you will encounter. Public healthcare in China is feared by some, not necessarily rightfully so. When it comes to short-term ailments, illnesses, or accidents, public healthcare system in China, I've always actually found to be very efficient and very good. You will generally find that if you have say a small injury or a small sickness, you can go in and out of hospital in a very short period of time and be seen to quite swiftly. There is usually a small consultation fee that goes along with that, depending on how long it takes and what you need to have done whilst in there. But it's usually not a huge amount of money, but make sure you take in your pocket a couple of hundred kwai if you're going into a hospital if you have something. Whereas in the UK, say if you felt a little bit sick for a little while, you might book an appointment with the GP. In China, you'd simply walk into a hospital, take a ticket and wait to be seen, which is really quite good. With public healthcare in China, however, if you do have a more long-term problem, if you do come across a more long-term illness, this is where the decline in quality really does show in public healthcare in China against many other countries. Many hospitals and many institutions aren't as well equipped. There are longer waiting queues, and the ability for the doctors and healthcare professionals to be able to deal with these more complex issues is rather less. There are international wings that exist in many public hospitals, especially in first and second tier cities in China, as well as private and Western healthcare professionals in various different cities. With relation to international doctors or international surgeries, you will be able to ask your school's HR departments for contacts of those in respective cities. They are generally very expensive and sometimes are not covered even by the most generous and comprehensive of international healthcare insurance policies. When it comes to insurance policies as well, we do recommend ensuring that you take out, in addition to your local health and accident insurance that will be provided by your school, an additional healthcare insurance policy. Again, at Opportunity China, we do work with a provider. We work with Ensley Insurance, who provide very reasonably priced comprehensive health insurance plans. If you're interested in taking one of those out, do contact us at info@opportunity-china.com, and we'll be able to help you get that set up with Ensley Insurance. You will receive quite a generous discount on the majority of their insurance policies. You are also going to be looking at healthcare in China, at things like pharmacies and drugstores. The thing to be aware of in China is making sure you tell, when you speak with your colleagues in China, if you want to get Western medicine, if you want to get Western drugs, making sure when you're asking for directions for where a pharmacy might be, that it is a Western pharmacy and not a traditional Chinese pharmacist, where you will find a whole range of drugs and medicine that we might not necessarily be familiar with and we might not be able to use quite so effectively. That's absolutely not to say that it doesn't work, and that's not to say that that it is wrong to use Chinese traditional medicine for those that choose to do it. But for those who are looking for specific Western medicines, do ensure that you ask whoever you're asking, whether it be your friend, whether it be your HR representative, where the nearest pharmacy is, that it is a Western pharmacy once you do that. Greg, any specific phone apps you can suggest we download? Really good question again. I will send out in my follow-up email a very big link all on applications that you can use in China. Some of these are really, really, really handy. The most prevalent apps, due to Google being banned in China and therefore not having access to things like Google Drive, Google Gmail, Google Maps, all of these things are Baidu apps. So Baidu in and of itself, as you can see here, is essentially China's homegrown version of Google. Baidu is really, really handy, but not necessarily for its search engine functionality among Westerners. What it is handy for are the apps that you can use, such as Baidu Maps. With Google Maps being blocked in China, you can actually use your VPN and access Google Maps to find things in China. But China has a very bizarre system where there are only certain companies that are related to the states that's related to the state that are actually able to use their maps and use GPS tracking coordinates precisely. So if you use a VPN, download Google Maps, very bizarrely, what you'll end up with will be the little symbol for you walking around about 3 miles off from where you actually are. So using Google Maps in China is never really a good idea, whatever way you look at it. Baidu Maps as a map finding tool is fantastic. It's got really good functionality. It tells you where everything is. It's available in English. You're able to track routes that you need to take if you need to use public transport, and get all sorts of brilliant information from it as well. Another really handy app to utilize is Baidu Translate. Again, if your VPN is down, using Baidu Translate is really, really, really handy. You can have Baidu Translate in English as well as in Chinese. It's got a really receptive automatic function where you speak into it and it says what you're saying to the person afterwards. It's actually a lot better than Google Translate, I found, for that. So Baidu Translate is another really handy app to be using whilst you're in China. Now, if you're looking to hitch a ride, the old-fashioned traditional way of doing it in China, back from when I was there certainly, is to put your hand up, hail a taxi, and ask them where you need to go. Or if you're new to China, give them a little bit of paper with someone's written on the address that you want to go to in. Now things are a fair bit easy. China has its own Uber-like service, which is called Didi, or Didi Chuxing to give it its full name. Didi as an app is only available to those who have Chinese SIM cards and Chinese bank accounts set up. But as this will be something that will be set up quite quickly for you, you'll be able to get a Didi account set up rather swiftly upon your arrival in China. Much like Uber, Didi is very user-friendly as an interface. You'll have a little map that'll show where you are, where the nearest cars are that can come and pick you up. And you can simply type in, even in English, the destination where you want to go. It'll automatically translate it and put it over. You can even write a message in English for the driver to let them know in advance that you're not Chinese and you won't be speaking the language. So if they call you to ask where you are, it won't be of much use. Also, all automatic text texting functions on it. If you need to contact your driver, if they don't know where you are, will be automatically translated from English from you typing them into Chinese. So Didi is a really super handy app to utilize whilst you're in China, once you have your bank account set up and everything set up there as well. These are, for me, the really big apps to use in addition to the very obvious, which is WeChat. So WeChat is, as I'm sure pretty much all of you will now know, knowing about China, the app to utilize in China. WeChat is, on the surface of it, an instant messaging app, but it is used for professional and personal communication by just about every single person in China. All communication that you'll do at work will not go through email like it would in the UK. It will all go through WeChat. There'll be multiple groups that will be set up for work, but also socially on WeChat. WeChat has a function where you're able to drop a pin to let people know where you are so they can find you and put that address into their Didi to come and get you, which is really handy. WeChat also has a payment function too that can be connected to your bank account, and you can use it to pay for pretty much anything in China. Even most market stalls now will have a barcode that you can scan and use WeChat Pay for. But if you don't want to use WeChat Pay to buy these things, there is also Alipay, which is a slightly more popular payment function among Chinese citizens. Again, if you scan pretty much any barcode in any store that you find, there'll be an Alipay barcode that you can use. You just need to attach Alipay to your bank account and get pretty much anything paid for instantly, or indeed pay anyone instantly. If you want to split bills at restaurants or anything like that, you can use WeChat or you can use Alipay for that. That is entirely up to you. Rowan, when traveling to China, apart from clothes and money, what other essentials should we pack? Really good question, Rowan, really good question. And another great question that can be answered by some of our fantastic teacher resources. Right at the top here, you will see our packing list. Now, this packing list will be sent out to absolutely all of you before your departure to China. But this essential packing list includes a really comprehensive list of things. We really do recommend printing it out and literally ticking these things off as you're packing them. But when it comes to remembering things for China, you first of all got to remember your key documents that you have. So once your visa process is done, all the document authentication is done, your visa's in your passport, you might think, oh, well, I don't need to take these documents with me to China. You're very wrong. You do still need to apply once you're in China for your work permit, your physical work permit card, and also your residency permit, for which all of these documents will be required. So ensure you take a physical copy of your authenticated bachelor's degree, police check, and TEFL, TESOL, or CELTA certificate if that is relevant to you. Make sure as well that you have a digital copy of that, and do also take a scanned copy of those as well with you. Make sure you really go belt and braces on these important key documents. Make sure you have your original degree certificate with you. Again, don't just take the notarized and authenticated true copy. Make sure you take your original degree certificate with you as well, as 100% of the time the authorities will want to see that on top of the authenticated true copy that you have. Make sure you have a copy of important contacts at your school. Make sure you have that digitally and also printed out just in case any batteries run out or anything like that. So that's names, phone numbers, addresses, just in case things like flights might get delayed or there are any problems whatsoever upon arriving in China. Make sure you have your driving license or any form of ID as a copy in addition to your passport that you will obviously be taking with you. Make sure that you have a passport scan copy printed off and kept with you at all times. So the reason for this is technically all foreigners in China have to carry with them at all times their passport with their residency permit in it. For practical and safety purposes, this of course isn't always possible. So make sure you have a printed copy of your visa page, your Chinese visa page, and a printed copy of your passport information page with your picture in as well. Take that with you, keep it with you in your wallet at all times, just in case. That will be absolutely fine. That will be enough for you. Make sure you take any debit or credit cards that you're going to be needing with you as well. And also make sure that you take any copies or scans of those debit or credit cards with you too, in case they're lost and you need that information. Any international insurance policy documents, if you've purchased them. So these are statements of insurance or SOIs. Make sure that you have those documents both in digital and a physical copy with you in case there are ever any accidents. Most important thing in a statement of insurance will always be the statement of insurance number, which will be usually at the top of any statement of insurance that you have, but do try and keep those with you at all times as well, so they can be shown when you need to contact any insurance providers if you have any accidents. Any medical prescriptions that you have should be taken with you too. Now, if you are taking very large amounts of prescribed drugs, or if you're taking medical prescriptions that you're unsure of whether you'll be able to take in, make sure that you contact, first of all, your GP to ensure that you get enough of them, and also to ask him whether he has any knowledge of any restrictions on going to that country. If you don't get any joy of finding any knowledge about restrictions going into the country, the next step would be to visit the China Embassy's website in your home country and find the consular office and the email address for them to contact there. I generally recommend emailing these institutions rather than ringing them. Ring them only as a last resort. Ringing them usually isn't quite so helpful. You'll end up on hold for quite a long time. They may even say that they don't know how to help you immediately, so you won't get too much luck later, whereas an email gives them a bit more time to find these things out. Failing that, it's also a good shout to contact the consular office or the embassy in China related to where you're going to be. So for those of you, say, who are going to be in Chengdu, contacting the Chongqing consular. For those of you who are going to be in Shenyang, contacting the Beijing consular. For those of you that are going to be in Shenzhen, contacting the Guangzhou consular office and asking them whether there's a limit on taking those prescriptions into the country or indeed into the territory where you are going to be living. Make sure you also have with you your original signed medical document if it was completed in your home country, and also a digital copy of that as well to take with you too. In terms of general items, taking toiletries, feminine products, deodorant is always actually quite a handy one to take with you. It might be something that you'll miss. Deodorant, spray-on deodorant in China is very expensive, as it is actually it's more seldom used than stick deodorant. In China, deodorant is a little bit less common than in the West. There is actually an interesting scientific fact that Chinese people perspire less, and it actually smells less bad than it does with Westerners as well. It's been scientifically proven, apparently. So ensuring that you take deodorant with you, as it isn't quite so common in China, is a really good idea. Two, taking lots and lots of sunscreen. Again, finding the right factor for you can be quite difficult, as Chinese skin reacts rather differently to sunlight than a lot of Western skin types do, as well as things like special shampoos that you might have, because again, it might be hard to find shampoo that works with different types of hair. Taking waterproof coats is going to be very important for the vast majority of you, especially as a lot of you are heading to places like Fuzhou and Shenzhen, where you have quite lengthy monsoon seasons that can come down on you. Taking any medicine that might be difficult to get in China, things like birth control tablets, as well as any generic medicine that you might need to take that's not a very serious prescription, taking things like paracetamol with you and ibuprofen. It's really important as well to remember to take things like a pocket Chinese phrase book too. It's just nice to have something physical to carry around with you, even though you might use Pleco or Google Translate or Baidu Translate. Actually having that phrase book with you is really handy and something that's good to teach you Chinese. Very often these phrase books have things written phonetically as well, which make it easier for you to be able to say as opposed to pinyin. We've got a whole section in our list on clothing that you'll be able to browse through, as well as electronics here too. And importantly, make sure you remember to take some teaching aids with you as well. Things that might be quite personal to you, things like any favorite books that you might have, that you have a real personal interest that you might want to teach, things that you might remember when you were younger if you're going to have a bit more freedom. Any photographs from home that might be of interest to students that you would have to help them really connect with you. taking small gifts for your school as well is always a really nice touch, and giving them to any colleagues or superiors that you might have, and also any USBs that are pre-prepared with teaching materials that you might like to will be really handy as well. Greg, is WeChat payment system secure enough to have access to your full savings account, or should we have a smaller account for WeChat Pay? Yeah, really good question, Greg. When you have WeChat Pay, it doesn't immediately have access fully to your Chinese bank account. What you can do is essentially pay in money from your Chinese bank account to your WeChat bank account, and you can pay in as much or as little instantaneously as you like. You can set it so that WeChat Pay sort of just instantly takes it out of your bank account, or you can choose not to do it. When it comes to security, it is a very secure system of payment, as is Alipay. Again, you can close off or add in as much as you like with that particular payment system, or with any payment system really in China. Let's going to talk a little bit about VPNs now. So again, if you go to our teacher resource page, you can find a section here on VPNs for China. Here we tell you pretty much what a VPN is, why you're going to need it, and we have a link to VPN Express, or ExpressVPN even, which is a partner that we work with. It's a VPN that I use. It's the most common VPN provider in China. The reason I personally tend to use ExpressVPN is that sometimes in China, VPN systems can get shut down. They're not as secure. They're a little more vulnerable, especially when politically sensitive meetings are taking place, like 2 sessions in China. Very often VPNs will suddenly become much more restricted. VPN Express usually works quite well throughout the year, so there's a little link there that you can take to VPN Express if you want to go and buy it. Once you download a VPN server, they usually all pretty much look the same, like this. It'll look the same on your phone as it will on your desktop screen, as you can see here. Absolutely make sure you download your VPN before you go to China, and you pay for it before you go to China, because the VPN websites themselves are going to be blocked in China and will only be accessible with a VPN. But once the VPN is downloaded and the software is installed, you've got that. You just need to remember to continue to pay your subscriptions. I recommend taking a 12-month subscription if you're going to be there for that time. You can, once you're on it, select a location that you want to go to. Most VPN services will use a smart location, which will pick up the nearest VPN spot to you. In China, this will generally be Hong Kong, which usually works fastest. But if you are in China, when using VPNs, using those from the Asia Pacific region that are in countries nearer to China, like Hong Kong, Japan, South Korea. If you're wanting to connect to those are usually good. Or using the strongest VPNs possible, which are usually in the Americas. For pretty much all VPN servers, they're usually almost always California-based ones. So using those VPNs too, as those will be the ones that will connect fastest and give you the fastest speed whilst using them. Georgia, what work clothes are we expected to wear in a public school? Again, very good question there. So when it comes to dress codes in China, we do have a really good blog about this. The majority of private language centers, you'll actually be provided a uniform for. You'll usually have a polo shirt, generally quite loose fitting sort of jeans, and you usually expect to wear things like trainers to be able to keep up with the high intensity atmosphere of them. With public schools, there usually isn't a set uniform that you'll be given to wear. However, some public schools are beginning to actually move into the area where staff have set uniforms as well as students, but it's very, very rare. For public schools, you're generally expected to dress smartly, but not going overboard. So wearing a smart shirt or a smart blouse, and smart trousers, or a smart dress, as well as smart black or brown shoes, generally being quite conservative with it. It's a little different to, say, teaching in Japan, where you'd be expected to wear a full suit and have absolutely everything all in line and your hair symmetrically perfect. In China, you are still expected to maintain a professional standard of appearance. Ties are not always necessarily common, but sometimes are. If you want to wear a tie, certainly no one will hold that against you. It's usually a good idea to dress very, very smart for your first week, see what everyone else around you is doing, depending on the public school you're in, and then work accordingly to that. Great. Any other questions just for the moment? Okay, what I shall do is just very briefly go over some really important safety points. So when it comes to China, it's important to always remember that China is a very different country with a very different culture, a very different political system, and a very different set of social norms and structures that exist. China cannot be treated in the same way as going to a country, say, in Europe or Australia or America or North America would be. There are certain precautions that you are going to need to take, and there are certain things that you're going to need to be careful about doing or about keeping up an appearance of whilst in China. Some of you will likely have seen news a couple of months ago, it may even have just been last month, of several English teachers being arrested in the city of Suzhou for having had drug residue found in their system from having taken drugs. In China, these were done through on-the-spot drug testings. These are things that happen in China. They're rare, they're very rare. But they're things that the police do have the right to do, and they are cracking down on drug use by foreigners in China, very often operating in bars, in clubs that foreigners tend to frequent, and they do have the right to demand an on-the-spot drug test from you. This isn't me necessarily saying that anyone will have taken drugs before they go to China, but once that drug test has been done, it doesn't matter where that drug was consumed. If it's in your system, you will be detained and you will be deported from China. So make sure that in the weeks leading up to anything, you say no to absolutely anything at all, that there is absolutely going to be nothing in your system. Make sure that once you're in China, you steer very clear of any activities that go on like that. Within certain sections of expat communities, there are things that happen with it. It is not worth the risk. It has never been worth the risk, but it's certainly not worth the risk in the current environment. And just be very, very careful with this. Now, it's really a good idea to visit the UK government's travel advice for China page before you go, to have an update on safety, on precautions that you need to take before you go to China. They do tell you a little bit more about this as a current issue in China, making sure that you're very careful before you go, that you don't have anything in your system, as well as natural disasters, local laws and customs, and information on regions that are politically sensitive. When it comes to health and safety in China, pollution is, of course, another really big thing to be aware of. Visit the aqacn.info page. This is China's domestic air pollution, air quality index page. You can search for any city that you like in there to see what the current air pollution levels are like, and a guide of what they are going to be once you're there. So let's say Shenzhen. It'll come up with a little map, and it'll have a lot of major locations where there are air quality indexes here. You can actually even search for your school, and you'll probably find what the air quality index is going to be for it. Of course, if you're in Shenzhen today, your air quality is going to be, well, very good indeed. But as with many things in China, as you start to work up, towards the heartland of China. So for those of you who might be in places like Zhengzhou or Nanchang, the air quality will decrease, meaning it'll give you an idea of, you know, maybe I'm not going to go jogging today, or maybe I should wear my mask today. Once you're in China, buying a mask is also going to be quite important for you. Making sure that you buy a mask with a filter built into it is going to be important as well, as there are going to be some days where the pollution is going to be particularly bad. If you live in the center of China, not in the sort of central west, in Chengdu and Chongqing, where it can be quite bad, it's not too bad, but say in Henan, in Zhengzhou, or if you're in the north, if you're in Beijing, or if you're even further up north in Shenyang or anywhere in Dongpei, the pollution is particularly bad. So making sure that you check those air indexes, particularly around the winter time, when the coal factories are really chugging it out. It's really important that you make sure you check that air pollution index. It is aqicn.org, basically stands for Air Quality Index. If you Google Air Quality Index China, you will find this website, but it is worth bookmarking. It is the most reliable source that you can get for it because it's pretty much up to date. It streams all of this stuff from various air quality points in different cities in China and beams it straight onto this website, so you can get an up-to-date read on exactly what the air quality is going to be in China before you leave the house each day. Again, keeping safe in China. China is a very safe country to be in, to walk around, and to be on your own. I feel considerably safer in China walking through a Beijing city centre, walking through Beijing alleyways at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, not that I recommend you do that, than I do in cities like London or even the town where I live in, because law and order is very tough in China and criminals are very heavily prosecuted. There is considerably less violent crime and considerably less chance of violent crime being committed against you than in countries like the UK and certainly like the United States. That's not to say that there isn't crime that happens in China. There is pickpocketing. That's one very common thing that can happen in large, populous, and especially touristy cities like Beijing and Shanghai, as well as a little bit around sort of Shenzhen area, but not quite so much. There are also things like scams for tourists. Again, this mostly happens in Beijing. If you're in second-tier cities, you're much less likely to have these kinds of crimes committed against you. But these sorts of petty crimes like pickpocketing and scamming are things to be aware of whilst you're in China as well. It's also almost certainly worth talking about the fact that China is a country that has very different viewpoints on things like assembly and speech to a country like the United Kingdom. It's not to say that men in black suits are going to take you away if you say something or do something or talk about politics in China. There is, in my opinion, very often a lot of overblown scare about these things that comes from Western media about China. But it is very prudent to be sensible about knowing what to talk about, when to talk about it whilst you're in China. China is a country where there can be some quite heavy patriotism, and criticizing China for certain things is usually not a good idea. It's generally bad manners if you're in someone else's country anyway, but being particularly aware and particularly sensitive of things that you're saying in China is very important. Again, a lot of this links into things like Mianzi and face and cultural concepts, where if, say, you're criticizing an aspect like, I don't know, the underground system not working very well, some people might take that almost as an attack on them or an attack on the country itself, and might become quite offended by things like that. Again, politically sensitive things, especially for those of you who might be flying in to Shenzhen from Hong Kong. If you are approached and given literature by protesters in Hong Kong, it's not a good idea to bring that with you into the mainland, and making sure that you don't have that with you at any security or border checks. And just being sort of aware of these things, I think, is very important. It's certainly nothing to be scared of. It's certainly nothing. Certainly something that, actually, to be completely honest, is broadly overblown. And you'll find when you make Chinese friends that they're very comfortable speaking on a whole range of topics that you might not expect. But being a little more careful than the sort of loose lip chat that you might have in a pub in Britain about things like this in China. Does anyone have any other questions just for the moment? Okay, well, what I will do is tomorrow morning I will send across an email with some really useful links to a lot of resources that you can use, as well as our pre-departure page, our packing guide, and also our frequently asked questions about living and working in China and what you need to do beforehand. As always, Opportunity China Coordinator will always be on hand to help you with any questions that you might have. Do feel free to contact us at any time and we'll ensure that we get back to you. But otherwise, I hope you have a lovely rest of the day and looking forward to starting your adventure in China. Thank you very much and goodbye.